So my name is Jacob Lachot. I'm a physical therapist here at TMC. This is live online, and we have one person in person today. So hopefully this view that you see is not too terrible. But this is part of the persistent pain series that we have here at TMC. And specifically today, this is on activity and exercise and how it affects chronic pain. So here we're going to be training the brain quite a bit. So in the very first part of the series, we talked about how the chronic pain is really a multifactorial problem. The nervous system really does change over time. Probably the most important parts of this slide to pay attention to when it comes to exercise and changing what the experience of pain is probably the right-hand side, basically the starting at descending modulation, the neuroimmune, the central sensitization, peripheral sensitization. Those are all things that get affected by exercise and can change when you apply enough exercise. So what typically happens is people reduce activity, they lose muscle strength, they get more pain, they rest more, and the cycle continues. Basically, there's more rest after more pain, and it kind of just digs into a hole, and people aren't quite sure how to change that. They know they're supposed to exercise, but they're not quite sure how to do that. Does chronic pain change with exercise? It does. When we study it, if you notice the timelines there for how bothersome it is for people and the pain intensity, they both change, and you don't really get much change until 3 weeks of consistent exercise, and we're going to talk about what's consistent. But then the best is yet to come after about 12 weeks of consistency. So there's a big word there called exercise-induced hypoalgiesia. That just means you're lowering your pain. You're improving your pain threshold whenever you stress the tissues enough that they respond in a way where they start to change over time. So yes, when you do study chronic pain and you make people exercise, it does change. How you do it matters some too. So if you're looking to be your primary goal of changing pain, some ways of exercise change it more than others. So if we take athletes that are mostly strength building, they tend to tolerate more pain than those that work on just general aerobic. They basically can tolerate a higher pain threshold. But the aerobic type of people, more endurance athletes, let's say, they endure pain better for a long duration. Some combination tends to work the best, though. And actually, from an exercise prescription standpoint, we should be working on both strength and aerobic capacity as part of a plan to lower chronic pain. And you can see why. But this is the real heart of things. This slide here showing what skeletal muscle tissue does to the chemistry of the body and how it keeps it from hurting. It is a regulatory process that human beings must have. It is our way of cleaning up things in the body. Inflammation is always kind of about us. It's a byproduct of our metabolism and doing things. And nothing gets done about it unless the muscles can be worked and stimulate a chemical process that goes and cleans up things for the body. Otherwise, the peripheral sensitization and central sensitization, that was part of that chronic pain slide, and how it changes your nervous system over time, those things just don't go away. They basically stay in the tissues all the time and keep stimulating the nerve endings and saying pain, pain, when exercise is not part of someone's regular schedule. But this is the real heart of it, and I'm going to get into a little more detail of the chemistry of things. But then there's another component. Basically, if the muscle down there at the bottom of the slide is sending nerve signal up to the brain has this great ability to do descending inhibitory chemistry. So whenever you partake in this particular task where exercise is having an effect on the body, the brain can turn down those signals through that midbrain there where you got some modulation in the middle slide there. And basically you train pain over time with exercise to be less intense, less bothersome, less sensitive to the same provocation. So there's a real chemistry here of how this changes over time. It's very measurable. And basically that's what this is saying. So in the absence of exercise, chronic pain is a lot of it's just related to a lifestyle issue. When it does come down to the underlying reasons of why we get that exercise-induced hypoalgesia, basically there's kind of a reward to the body itself, where if we're not getting that, there's no reward on a regular basis. The body just kind of keeps things in the tissues. Regular physical activity tends to be basically a protection thing from what we'd call peripheral insults. So like, let's say you get poked in the tissues somewhere. That stimulus of being poked is basically less over time when you tend to stay the most active. And your body will use that as a repair mechanism. That's how it cleans up stuff. A big Harvard study basically said chronic pain as a theory has probably been able to develop because of lack of movement. It tends to be a survival mechanism to continue to move even if you are in pain, and then you tend to move out of pain. When otherwise these days, if we do get pain, like a low back pain, we tend to rest a lot. But that's kind of a genetic mismatch. Our genes are meant to have a certain amount of movement, regardless of an injury. And if we don't do that enough, we tend to keep it. And the way we keep it is this chemistry problem. It's really complicated. It's not just exercise by itself, but basically the amount of adipose on a person, how well their immune system's being regulated, how well nerves are firing, how support cells are doing their job. They all have this chemistry problem of keeping inflammation around. And people think it's pretty mechanical, like there's a picture of a knee on their cartoon picture, and it's showing inflamed. In reality, people think like if I go do a bunch of squats and running, that'll mechanically break down my knee. But it's so much more involved than that. The breakdown or how bad you feel in the knee can be just the chemistry about you. And then when you try and test your knee, it already hurts. And it basically is providing more stimulus greater than the mechanical part of it. So it isn't just about the matter of nerves. Basically, all the helper cells that are around the nerves, they get trained. When they don't get stuff to do, they kind of misbehave, and they do increase the amount of inflammatory cytokines in and around nerves, and nerves get to tell your brain way too much pain. That's part of that chemistry problem of not getting enough movement. They tend to amplify pain just past its normal amount. Another chemistry thing is we have our own cannabinoids in our brain. That's part of that first slide where the brain's modulating the rest of the nervous system. We kind of have this as a reward. So internally, when we do stuff that is exercise, we are supposed to be rewarded chemistry-wise. The less you're doing of exercise, the less that reward system is available. So we have nerve endings that talk to each other, and they have a bunch of receptors that are supposed to share information. And if you don't stimulate that enough, it goes away. The more you do exercise, the more the reward you get. Basically, you lose receptors over time for reward, the less you exercise, and then therefore it's harder to get back into it and enjoy it. If someone gets back into it and stays consistent with it, you build up those density of receptors, and you get to share a lot more happy hormones, chemistry, and be rewarded, feel good from doing your exercise. So genetically, we're not really meant to want to seek out extra effort. That's kind of, we're wired not to. Like actually as an organism, we want to share or save or spare our calories. We're actually not meant to go seek out exercise. But for some odd reason, human beings are very unique, and their ability to have this chemistry reward and benefit from exercise, probably more than any other species. And quite an understated slide here. Basically, this is the gut microbiome. We have this metabolism that's always got an exhaust, basically byproduct of it. Whenever it's always running, we got to stay alive. It's got to go somewhere. And the more you exercise, it actually literally feeds your gut. And this can lead to a whole host of different things. It keeps the gut microbiome pretty happy, though, if we get regular fitness. So what's the normal amount of fitness? 150 minutes per week is kind of the magic number. 2 times of that week should be some pushing around of weights, keeps up our muscles. I'm going to get into that a little bit. The reason why they come to that number, though, on this slide here, basically, if you get to that 150 number, there's kind of a target range listed on there. You have a 40% decreased risk for all causes of mortality in life, the common things that kill us, if we get to that number. If you go more than that number, the payoff is less as you go, but it is more. And so that's why this new study actually came out on July 25th. It does talk about 600 minutes, somewhere between there. And 600 minutes is a lot. That's like several more hours per week of actual exercise. And I'm not talking anything very vigorous, just aerobic in general. And I'll show you a graph that shows the effort levels that you should be thinking about. But this is the chemistry problem. So 40% off the top if you get to 150, but probably another 30% if you're getting towards the 600 minutes. That's quite a bit of exercise. I'm training for a few endurance events coming up this fall, running plus cycling, and I still am not at the 600 minutes. So it's quite a bit of effort. But if you're somewhere in there, it tends to be better. Some of you wonder if the weekend warrior is getting it done. And it seems like for all-cause mortality, like cardiovascular risk and diabetes and cancer risk, it actually does. So you can concentrate your exercise towards the weekend in a higher dose and not do nearly as much or anything actually towards the weekdays and still get quite a bit of benefit. But for those that are in chronic pain, that's different. You're kind of asking for orthopedic injuries if you're doing everything all in one tense moment and then not much during the rest of the week. But it does have quite a bit of health benefits. So I'm here preaching the importance of exercise with chronic pain, but there's certainly a few myths I just got to dispel. I'm always on my soapbox yelling at these all day. Basically, if you've been told that you have damage, it's kind of tough to get going. Don't believe that pain is always it being the thing that's causing you damage. I showed you the chemistry of it. Sometimes things just can hurt, but the more you get going, you can clean up inflammation in there. As far as bending and lifting goes, it can make some back conditions worse, knee pain worse, but some of those things, it can be really tested. Scans like MRI, those are kind of those things that are kind of a poor indicator of whether or not you can contribute to your fitness. There's plenty to think about here, but here's a couple examples. Kind of a culture problem we have of promoting fitness. On the left there is, basically looking at knee arthritis in runners. There's a higher amount of knee arthritis in sedentary people than normal recreational runners. And you don't really get any difference or increase in the amount of arthritic changes you see in the knee until you get to the elite or professional level. So you can do quite a bit of effort before you start to break things down. And that's more than the 600 minutes that I'm talking about. More towards the right, there's kind of these colorful slides there that there's actually looking at discs in your back. Discs are responsive to exercise, just like you go push around weights in the gym, your muscles get bigger. Discs are responsive in that way. So basically, if I MRI somebody and make them go on a running program, you gradually see their disc get thicker. And so if someone's been told they have a bad disc, believe it or not, the impact of running is literally good for discs and making them taller and making more space for nerves and that kind of thing. And it's kind of a culture problem how we approach exercise. And that's why I want to dispel some myths about its safety and it's contributing to you changing your pain. Like this one, for example, they basically had a group of middle-aged adults that never ran a marathon in their life, took MRIs of their knees, never had any knee pain, but found a bunch of stuff was wrong with them, or at least what people would consider. So like arthritic changes and meniscal tears and all of that. So they spent 4 months training for the London Marathon and completed the London Marathon and got their MRIs done again. And it actually literally improved their joint space. So meniscus tears solidified, cartilage thickened. It took, like, the impact of running 26 miles and training for it over 4 months improved all of their arthritic changes in their knees. So running can be good for your knees. You got to dispel some of the beliefs about some things we promote about exercise. I've said a little bit of this before. There's other health factors we're looking at when it comes to exercise. Obviously, a lowered risk of stroke and diabetes and blood pressure issues, cancers, all kinds of cancers. Alzheimer's, that first slide about the gut microbiome, there's some level of research pointing to that kind of thing, and that's how exercise contributes to less. Depression is one of those things, and maybe that's one of your barriers. You can use exercise as a way of getting over some of the intensity of depression. So there's lots of things to be said. You get sick less often. There's a lot to contribute to your overall health here when it comes to putting in enough exercise in the right ways. And so this is part of the problem. Our comfort is pretty high all the time. We have a pretty comfy life. Part of stressing the system, the organism, us as humans, is getting enough exercise, stress it just right, and there's adaptive changes and a cleanup process that happens that genetically we have to have. Otherwise, we tend to have disease. But there's other factors there, and I won't go into detail, but this might be part of it. It's just that we're pretty comfortable all the time. We don't get hot or cold. We don't experience wide range of temperatures. We don't go hungry very often. But when we do some of those things and test our body, it actually turns out to be some good health outcomes. So this is kind of detailing what like a 0 to 10 pain scale is a common thing that we use in here. Like 0 is no pain, 10 is everything. No pain is not expected when you're moving. You're going to have some pain. This says running on here because this was a study about how to keep injured runners running, but it's pretty applicable to about any orthopedic thing that comes in here. Because it's not expected to have no pain, maybe some people have pain when they just get up, but let's say you're doing yard work or you're starting to do exercise, there's kind of an acceptable amount. As long as it recovers, it doesn't stay for a really excessive long time. You can fudge the numbers past 5 on this scale, as you see here. Like, if you're 5 out of 10 while you're doing certain things, but it recovers fairly quickly and, you don't have any lasting consequence from it, consider that okay. And remember about the, chronic pain, your nervous system telling you things are hurting doesn't mean that's literally damaging it. And this is what tends to happen when we've been in chronic pain, and you tend to test your body and then kind of test it too much and it gets mad. Basically, normal firing levels at the top there, where let's say you have a certain capacity to do things, and then you should have an expected amount of effort put in before you start to feel pain. But the more you do that, the more sensitive you become. So like the after pain part, there's kind of this little room for activities. And some people that are in chronic pain feel that way. They basically barely do anything. Like they go vacuum 2 rooms in their house and then they're floored for a couple of days. It's about changing that range there. And then maybe this next slide is kind of getting at that. People live in this kind of boom and bust approach to either exercise or activity. You push it past your tissue's capacity level or what your nervous system thinks is a threat, and then you lay around for a few days, and then you hit it hard again, and you kind of keep doing this, and basically you lower your own threshold over time, and you train your nervous system. Okay, there's a threat here. If I do these things, I'm just going to hurt myself. You need to go the other way. Maybe flirt with danger and just go up to that line and start pushing that line further and further. There's kind of a sweet spot there. If we do too little, we get no adaptive changes. If we go more than that, well, then you can make tissues mad. You've exceeded your capacity. But there's a sweet spot where, you basically want to keep going up to the threshold of your activity. Maybe about yourself, you can only go a quarter mile before your knees start to hurt or your back starts to hurt, but where your threshold is, and then you start to pick away at that. I'm always about changing people's perceptions of aging. So how much of kind of being able to do less over a lifetime is normal? So here's an example of grip strength in populations that are more hunter-gatherers around the world. So there's lots of dots on this, but basically more or less, it's a little higher on the start of the graph and it kind of slopes down. It's showing a little bit of a decline when it comes to grip strength over a lifetime. So like this graph goes all the way up to 85 years old. Some of these are in Africa, some of these are in South America, and they're different populations, and some are men and some are women. But basically, this graph goes a little bit of a dip, as you would expect, to lose a little bit of strength over life. But it's not this. This is grip strength in U.S. men and women, where it's this really predictable, like steep decline between 53 and 69, where actually the 53 is about half as much as those other population of hunter-gatherers. This is what we expect because we do tend to just decline in physical activity. If you don't use it, you lose it. And this is part of that problem. You know, what is normal? Well, it doesn't seem to be that normal actually when you look at other populations on the planet that just don't have the same comforts we do, where we don't have to work that hard. They keep their fitness. They actually don't change in blood pressure. You don't see diabetes. There's a low prevalence of back pain. Cardiovascular disease doesn't really exist. And you know, some of this is just lack of activity this population tends to get. But this is what's normal in the US, but it's not normal for humans. And this is what this slide says here, is basically the top of the graph is life, end of life, there's that shaded region of morbidity. Basically like at the end of life, people have some disabling things in their health that make them move less. And then, you know, basically they, looks like the graph kind of tails off at 75 years old, but down at the bottom, you know, there's basically this 1/3 of Americans that's the 1/3 end of their life is spent in a lot of disability. And what's normal is more like the shaded line above it, where basically if you were physically active and you didn't smoke, you maintain a normal weight, you know, diet's in check, you should be more like the top graph where things are awesome and then dead. And the idea is that that's what you want, right? I think anybody would, instead of a fair amount or percent of our life spent in disability. That's more normal. And that's what 150 minutes gets you. It's more towards the maybe, you know, 10 to 20% less of that shaded region. You know, this slide in this study basically says something about master athletes. You know, almost like achieving that 150 minute is a goal, but in reality, that's like the bare minimum. That's what we should all be achieving, and then more than that is more master-like. So, you know, if somewhere's between the 150 and 600 minutes tends to be a lower amount of morbidity at end of life, less disability towards end of life, that's more normal towards our genetics. That's mostly what we should be looking like as far as quality of life goes. I've showed this slide before. You know, our muscles, they do have a chemistry about them. I showed that on the first slide about how it cleans up stuff whenever we stimulate them and your body gets to work. This is part of the process too. If I lose, people think when we age, we lose muscle. I showed you that in a grip strength thing that no, that's not quite true. But when it's also opposite as that, when we lose muscle, it signals to the rest of our body to age. So the more we lose, the more the chemistry happens there to tell the rest of us to age. So leading to disability. For example, MRIs of people's thighs. 3 different people on the left there, 40-year-old triathlete, and then 2 people below are the same age, 74 and 70. You know, they look very different inside. One's a triathlete and one's not. One's just got a lot of adipose mixed in there with the muscles. But that density of muscle problem, like lack of fitness, is contributing to making that person older. On the right is more of the same person from age 25 to 63. So sarcopenia is like the fancy word for loss of muscle, but it basically can contribute to a whole lot of other health conditions out there. So what are we looking for as far as intensity goes? We should be in moderate or less. That tends to be most of the health benefits. As far as even like me training for a marathon later this fall, I'm pretty much in the moderate or light for 80% of my training. I only go 20% up into the hard and maximum. And that gets me most of my fitness. Remember this RPE scale, this rate of perceived exertion, because it's going to play a role in something else I'm going to say. But if you are willing to risk it, you push yourself a little harder into more vigorous activity, it does ward off chronic pain due to aging. So in this study, it was more like tennis and pickleball and stuff like that. If that was added in, then we tend to have better outcomes in changing chronic pain for ourselves. Walking is great. Basically aiming for that 150 minutes. I think when we had another talk earlier this year, it tended to be about 6,000 steps was the magic number for reaching that 40% decreased risk for all mortality. But 10,000 might be better. There's kind of a range there. Not all humans are the same. They all respond differently to exercise. Some people are wondering about fitness through their housework. Yes, it can, but it has to be vigorous enough. When we study it, it turns out no, because people are terrible about reporting what vigorous means. So if I said, that rate of perceived exertion, what would you say is hard for you? Somebody else vacuuming or sweeping their house is going to say very hard, when in reality for our genetics, it's probably not that hard. It's, if it's hard for you in chronic pain. But like my dad, for instance, does no exercise at all, and he totally controls his blood pressure and diabetes through just general housework. And he has to mow the lawn and shovel snow and do wood chopping and stuff like that. And you'll see him get off of his blood pressure medication, and his blood sugars will stay in check. So there's some measurable things you can do if you get fitness just the right way through exercise. And some people say, do I get enough work at my job? It's not true either. So, I think there's a reason why all of our plumbers don't really look like athletes. Yes, they get a lot of fitness, but they're not doing anything terribly vigorous. And, in isolation, exercise doesn't control all health factors. You can have a terrible diet and sleep and drink a lot and exercise all you want, and you're probably not going to contribute to your health very well. And this is also one of those things that's hard to measure, what's difficult for someone. Raking concrete, that's very vigorous, and that's probably a good cardiovascular stressor. It probably is contributing to your fitness. But it isn't all the time, and it may be not enough to contribute to someone's fitness. But, do question whether or not your job is literally providing enough physical activity regularly enough to contribute to your fitness and change your pain. Per the studies, it doesn't seem like it is. So you might have to seek out fitness outside of your job. And there's plenty of determinants that get people moving or not. And I definitely want to talk about barriers to getting fitness. This is actually a handout called Mobilize. It's got QR codes with resources if people have basically any one of these problems with getting going. So if pain's your main determinant thing, you got to get to figuring out how to get clever about getting your exercise in. If you got pain in your knee, maybe you're going to join a place that has a pool. Maybe you're going to a fitness class that has somebody that accommodates you when you're having your knee pain. Work with a trainer. They can get clever about how to get fitness in with you if you're confused about how to get it. There's breathlessness and fatigue. If you're too tired for doing it, there's ways around that. You got to be clever about energy management. Depression and anxiety, I did talk about how that gets lowered when you do get enough exercise. It's literally a tool to combat that. But, it's hard to get the initial burst going. Lack of knowledge about, how to exercise and what exactly to do. Don't want to be one of those boom and bust folks. Go seek a professional, like I said, personal trainer or a therapist, and see what you can do. Financial issues, lack of transport, those things are common things. If you can figure out what's free as far as exercise goes, like walking, there's lots of free programs around the community here for sure. Join some of those free resources if you can. Walking's free. Lack of time is one of those interesting things. If you have time to scroll around on social media, I'm sure you could go walk for 20 minutes. And the hard part is prioritizing. I think the biggest social experiment we had was COVID lately, and we were handed abundance of time, and people exercised way less. So if it was just that, I think we would have seen the opposite. Social support, though, if your family is, dynamics is something that's getting in the way of doing it, you do have to figure out how to navigate that. And that's kind of difficult to talk about, but it can be something that's a barrier to seeking fitness. Other things can be just changing your habits. I mean, you do have to get into a schedule and a rhythm. Like I'll set out all my workout stuff beforehand, just so I'm like most likely to just get going in the morning. Fear of falling is definitely one of those things, but there's plenty of exercise classes. If you can get screened by somebody and figure out where your risks are and figure out what you need to do, there's plenty of Tai Chi, Pilates, yoga classes, or just literally balance and strength classes available. So do something you like to do, do it with other people. That reward of chemistry I was talking about, that's actually part of that. We're supposed to do it with other people. Go find a workout buddy that's going to be similar to your efforts or goals. But do something you feel good about. If you hate the treadmill, don't do it. Go figure out something else. And you get activity in small bursts. When every time I mop the floors, I'm making it vigorous on purpose. And why not? I'm just getting a bout of exercise in, and that contributes to your longevity and fitness. Why not? But get clever about how you do that. Park a little further, take the stairs, do extra yard work in a way that you can just to get some more fitness. But it does have a whole lot of health outcomes that, if it's not part of your life, you're probably contributing to having these problems. So if there is a problem with some conditions out there where they have a lot of chronic fatigue, and pacing is a real thing, basically you want to gradually increase as things go over time. Like I said about that boom and bust thing, you do need to figure out how much total reserve you have in your day to figure out where you want to be fitting in fitness. Some people get an energy boost when they do it at the end of the day, but they feel like they're kind of sucked of energy because of the day. And you need to figure out where it would work for you and your schedule. Where are you going to be most likely to fit it in? What's going to be successful for you? And then you can break it up, take breaks if you need to, or break up housework. If you're going to do a project around the house, don't do all of it at once. Try to figure out what makes sense to break it up. But that way you can save room for fitness. This spoon theory is kind of one of those. So you could take any activity, really, grocery shopping, dealing with your kids, making dinner, all of those take out of your total gas tank reserve of energy level. And budgeting makes sense. If you could fit more fitness in a different day because you have the time or effort or energy for it, go for it. And then if there's less one day, it's about consistency. That's kind of the real deal. But I'm always going to challenge people's perception of things. How much you feel like you can tolerate whenever you do your house activity, or how far you can walk, or what you feel is true about your body whenever you try to do fitness things, and it could worsening your pain or contributing to pain, is modifiable. So I think everybody knows about placebos. That's when you get a positive effect from something you're not expecting it to. So like if I have a medication and I randomly tell people, you're getting this pill and they don't know which one they're getting, and you see a measurable effect in the people that are not actually getting any medication, that's a placebo. A nocebo is the opposite. So you get a negative effect. So like, let's say I tell you something and you see a decrease in performance. And this is one of those that's just one of the most fun studies I like to nerd out on, is when you take normal healthy athletes and you lie to them about certain conditions, like you make them ride a bike to failure in a room and you'd lie to them about the temperature or humidity in the room, and you totally see the effect you're expecting. And when you lie to them, you totally see their performance drop, even though we didn't actually change anything in the room. But you get it going both ways. And these are normal, healthy people, but you could totally mess with them. But your perception of your reality is your reality. And so, do question the things that you feel. Am I truly limited to do this? Is this really going to hurt me? Be smart about how you approach fitness. Make sure you're healthy enough to do that. But I'm telling you about, flirt with danger here a little bit. That's the only way you're going to nudge the line and teach your nervous system over time, just this less threat. For example, there's some awesome bodies here. I think the gal on the left deadlifting there, I think she's 75. She was just pissed because she couldn't get out of a chair. But she definitely can get out of a chair now. The middle gal running with sandbag, she's fused from certain levels in her spine with plates and rods, and she only feels good when she competes in Spartan races. So they're 13 miles long with obstacle courses, and that's why her back feels good. The gentleman down at the bottom does the longest plank in recorded history. It's something crazy like 9 hours. He only did this because he has chronic pain. He has what's called CRPS. It's a complex regional pain disorder. In his arm, you can see a sleeve on his arm. It was just to teach him how to teach his nervous system how to deal with the intensity of pain. So there's examples there of how you can teach yourself to get to another level of functionality when you teach your nervous system, downgrade the threat, less pain, keep moving. So in conclusion here, exercise is safe for the body, and it doesn't contribute to degeneration. I mean, it can. I mean, you could do things terribly wrong, but overall theme, it actually totally improves degeneration. Remember, chronic pain has changed your nervous system. It really is reporting things falsely to the rest of your brain, and you really do need to question what's hurting your body and how can you get clever about challenging this through exercise. Pain is trainable. The stress you put in, that's literally what gets the reward. The more vigorous potentially has more reward. But like I said, humans are meant to move, and a lot, and it isn't normal to have a sedentary life. You will keep these inflammation factors about you if you don't move enough. And you do need to get clever about how to remove the barriers to seeking fitness. You just need to figure out how to make it successful. There's plenty of resources there. If somebody gets a hold of the slides, you can scan the QR codes and see lots of resources there. Alrighty. That is it.